All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you've gotten some really good information over the past couple of days, and I hope that this will add to that information. As Sherry said, I have the advantage of being in the same building with both Pam and Sandy and also their OT, so we collaborate with them a lot to find out what they're working on and everything, and then how we can support that and address that through our sessions with the children that we work with at my clinic. And just a quick overview. I know a lot of times when people think of ABA or behavior analysis, you think of children on the autism spectrum. But behavior analysis is used with all different types of developmental disabilities. It's even used in the workforce for team building activities. And pretty much what I do as a behavior analyst is that I come in and I really look at the environmental components that contribute to behavior. It's not a thing to walk around and go in and say, oh, well, it's your fault that it's happening, but it's more so of looking at, okay, why is this behavior occurring? Because it's really important not just to figure out how to make it stop, but to figure out why it's occurring and figure out a functional replacement behavior and or adaptive behavior so that we can get to the treatments and therapies that we need for the children and adults that we work with. I do tell people that ABA is not really formally a therapy. It is a science. The applied behavior analysis of it, I tell teachers, other therapists, even listening to Pam talk about motivation, all those are different components of applied behavior analysis. The difference with myself working directly with a child or with a family is that's our primary focus. As we deal with behaviors, and everything that we do is a behavior. Our learning, our breathing, and then there's also behavior that we hear about is the child flopping to the floor, being non-compliant, not following through with demands, and those type of things. So when I speak of behavior, it can be twofold, but primarily today I'm going to focus on those challenging behaviors that we do have with our children sometimes. So again, what does ABA do? We look at learning new skills, improve or maintain appropriate behaviors, and then also reduce behaviors that interfere with our activities. That could be anywhere from sitting in a conference room, as we are here, in a church, in a therapy, different things like that. But what can we do to help improve those challenging behaviors? What ABA is really all about is behavior modification and, as I said, skill development. And the fact of the matter is, and this is always the point that I emphasize with everybody, is behaviors always occur for a reason. They really do. They rarely ever come from nowhere. There might be those covert things that we can't see, those things internally, but we can still find different reasons that might be considered unknown, but typically behaviors always occur for a reason. And the big point to drive home is that behavior is communication. As Sherry was talking earlier about Kaylee with, not wanting, or Pam as well, not wanting to do something. Her behavior indicated crying, maybe screaming, not wanting to do something, but really diligently working through, and as I say, guided participation, not forcing a child to do something, but really guiding them through different things in order so that they have that exposure to desensitize to different things and be able to experience the things with use of their hands or new foods or different issues as such. And then the fact of the matter is we shape behavior over time. There are no quick fixes. I know I wish there was, and that's always what I forgot my magic wand today, because usually a lot of times I really will bring a magic wand and go ding if I could make it all work. And to be very honest, more times than not, the families that I work with, about the time that they're ready to give up and think this isn't working, the behavior gets worse, then all of a sudden, kaboom, it improves. The behaviors drastically improve. So a lot of times it's the diligence and consistency across the board, across people, across school, across family members, really following the same plan of action in order to get the same results. And it takes time, because as humans, we're stubborn. So it takes time to get and have change with behavior. And then I also tell people behavior is not about talking necessarily. It's about doing. We do have a lot of behavior analysts that are also licensed professional counselors and such. And I always tell families, it's not that as a behavior analyst, that I don't look at what's happening here and here, the head and the heart, but primarily I'm looking on what's going around me, and we've got to take action to do different things to get those behavior results that we want. And the important thing to remember also is that we've got to look at it as one behavior at a time. Many times when I do work with families or with schools, they have a list. There's like tons of different behaviors they want to work on. And it's really prioritizing of what is our number one thing that we want to look at first. You've got to, win the different battles to win the war. Or as I say sometimes, what hill do you want to die on first? Let's go for that. Let's really drive it home and really work with that. And it's important to think about what's the specific behavior, who is involved, when does the behavior occur, and where does the behavior take place and why. All of those are important components. And even when working with someone or a teacher at school, trying to figure out why those behaviors are occurring. And then how we are responding that may reinforce this behavior. Because more times than not, a lot of times that's what it is we're inadvertently reinforcing the very behaviors that we're wanting to get rid of. So anytime we talk about reinforcement, that means the behavior is increasing, bad or good. The behavior is increasing when we're saying it's reinforcing. So that's why it's very important to look at that. And then what new behavior do we want them to learn? Many times our kids hear stop, no, quit, don't. Those seem to be the main focus. And instead, what do we want them to do instead? That's why I encourage parents, tell them what you want them to do versus what you don't want them to do is a very important thing to remember. And as a behavior analyst, my husband laughs at me all the time because we'll go to McDonald's and I'm sitting there looking at other kids too and trying to figure out, okay, why are they throwing a tantrum or stuff like that? But it's breaking it down and looking at the functions of things. As a behavior analyst, this is the primary thing that we look at. It's why is the behavior occurring? What function does it serve? What does the individual get out of demonstrating that behavior? And in the world of behavior analysts, there are 3 primary functions of behavior, and possibly 4, because you can divide the attention and tangible into 2 different things. But when behavior is for attention or to gain access to a desired item that they may want, but not for inappropriate behavior. I always think of the child in the line at the grocery store. That's a good example. You walk up and there is the dreaded candy zone and you're hearing, I want that, and you have the kid that's throwing a fit and the parent going, here, be quiet, and giving it to him. Well, guess what? The next time you go to the grocery store, that's what the kid's going to do. I'll use my husband as an example because he's not here at the moment. I can do that. My son, when he was about 2 years old, walking out of a restaurant, there was a gumball machine. He wanted a gumball. He asked me, I didn't have a quarter. I really didn't have one. Well, he starts throwing a fit that he wanted a gumball. Here's my husband digging in his pocket, trying to find a quarter. And I said, next time we come here, you better always bring a quarter in your pocket because he's going to ask. Because in other words, it was here, just get him to be quiet. And sure enough, so the next time we went in that restaurant, I was just like, told you so. Carry the quarters. But that's a prime example. Or the child that I always laugh with when you're on the telephone, how the child always tends to be attracted to the fact that when you're on the phone, ooh, let's go bug mom. That's a big one. Mama, 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 mama. That's why my kids know this and this very much. I'm still acknowledging them, but I'm not paying attention to that behavior. So he might go away a little stomping mad because this is my way of saying you need to wait. I'm on the phone without having to interrupt my conversation. So that would be attention tangible. Avoidance, escape. The behavior is the result of trying to get out of or delaying the completion of demands or not complying with instructions. This is what we might see more so in a therapy situation when it's challenging for the child to complete, as they were talking earlier, standing or walking. I do remember, like with Kaylee, some of the things that we would do was that resistance when we would play a drum or something. And that resistance of thinking, was it a sensory, different things, but really kind of inching into it, not just completely stopping it, but let's hit 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and then we're done. But really following through with that demand situation. But it's common ones that we see are, telling the child to clean up the room and they scream, or they're in school and the teacher tells them to write something and they toss a pencil. And usually the result of that is you end up getting sent to the office. Well, Unfortunately, you just reinforce that escape behavior because then they figure out, oh, I do this, I get out of demand. And then we have the sensory. Behaviors are more reinforcing than other competing reinforcement. We do see that a lot with our kiddos here as well. The behavior itself is reinforcing, that they don't need anybody else to give them any type of reinforcement, that they find it by hand-mouthing. We might also even have the children that exhibit self-injurious behavior, but it's a sensory-based, that they might be biting on themselves, but they get a sensory gain out of it. But then it can also be twofold, that it might serve two different functions. In this case, I do it because it feels good. In this case, I'm going to bite myself to get out of a demand because you're like, oh, don't bite yourself, and everything stops. And the demand doesn't continue. Oops. There we go. So when we're looking at changing behavior, a very important, I'm a big prevention person. That doesn't mean walking around on eggshells and avoiding every possible situation to avoid having a child have a meltdown. But prevention is key, because if we can prevent it from occurring in the first place, then we don't have to worry about how are we going to respond to the behavior. So when we're thinking about antecedent, this means things that occur prior to. We look at what can I do to reduce it? How can I put things in place to prevent those behaviors? When we're thinking about attention tangible, we give lots of intention or an enriched environment to prevent the behaviors. That really is a big one, especially even when we have a child that might exhibit negative behaviors sometimes to gain your attention. Giving them the attention when those behaviors aren't occurring is such a big key a lot of times. And even eye gaze sometimes is amazing. That you figure with children that wouldn't be such a strong one, but even eye contact and giving them that time and attention when the behaviors are not occurring, to teach them that this love and this joy and everything comes when we're doing those things that we need to be doing. And then we have escape avoidance to reduce the motivation. You can reduce the demands, decrease the task effort. That would be things like an assisting, that guiding, as I said earlier, is not forced application of things, but a guided participation. Mixing and easy and difficult things together. Again, motivation is such a key. I can't emphasize enough of that motivation. It might be, 2 minutes of a certain type of exercise or something. Using a timer. I actually do carry a timer in my purse that I've given to parents before when I see them out, because it's an amazing tool, is using a timer. And saying, okay, we're going to do this for 2 minutes. When the timer goes off, then we're going to do this. First this, then this. Those different types of language and stuff really work well. Rather than, don't cry, you need to stop, we're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. It can be as simple as, first we're going to do this exercise, and then you get to listen to or watch your video. First this, then this. And that also, as a parent, keeps you more focused on what you're trying to do rather than getting worked up and upset when your child's upset, because that also feeds the behavior too as well. And that oftentimes is such a difficult thing. I know I had the patience of Job with everybody else's child except my own many times. So I have to step outside of myself and really focus on practicing what I preach, of saying of having that patience of addressing those things. And then when we're talking about automatic reinforcement, it's really keeping the child engaged. It's a lot of providing that enriched environment to incorporate reinforcing stimulus in other ways, other than you might have the rocking or the hand-mouthing or different things. And then we're also looking at the plan. You heard me say earlier, a really important thing to do is to teach replacement behavior. What do you want your child to do instead? That's very important to focus on that as well. It takes a lot of time to shape behavior over time. So you've got to look at what do I want them to do versus what I don't want them to do. So when we're looking at attention tangible, teach your child a communication behavior of asking for attention or what he or she wants. That's a huge one. That's where I work a lot with speech and language pathologists. Okay, what is your medium or mode of communication? What are you focusing on? And as a behavior analyst, I take the experts, the speech language pathologist address of how they're addressing the communication, and address that through what we do in our therapy to really support that so they have a way to communicate. Because communication is be it pointing at something, be it an augmentative device, be it sign language. Communication is such a powerful thing. And many times with a lot of the children that I work with, as soon as you give them that medium of communication, the behaviors go way down because they have a way to tell you what they want and what they need. And even if it's one word or at one point or pointing at a picture, it's so important to really find that communication behavior. And our clients, I mean, that's really where we start no matter what the diagnosis is establishing that form of functional communication that is supported by the speech language pathologist so we can give that child the ability to be able to communicate wants and needs. And then when we're talking about escape avoidance, it can be sometimes as simple as teaching them to ask for a break or when they've had too much. You also have to avoid that a little bit to a certain degree because you'll also have the child who'll be asking for a break all the time just trying to get out of the task. So it's really finding that equal medium between the two. And then also sometimes it's as plain and simple as teaching compliance of working through it. Let's do this first and then this. Let's do this first and then this, and really working through the demand. In the moment of it, as I said earlier, it might be reducing that task demand. I like to use the example of like the ABCs. It might be our goal when we sit down and work with the child to do A through Z, but by the time we get to G, we notice that we're starting to have some behaviors, some self-injurious behavior happening, a little bit of crying, that I might decide, okay, in my mind, you know, let's do a few more and then we'll take a short break. But again, it's more of that compliance issue versus you're getting a break because look at what you've done, not you're getting a break because you're melting down. And that's, again, when we look back at what I just talked about was the prevention of knowing what those breaking points are and being able to have those reinforcing opportunities in between so that you don't have the meltdowns. And then with automatic reinforcement, again, in teaching them to enjoy social interactions, this has to really be a directed thing that you do. Is teaching them wanting to be in our world instead of their own, necessarily. And it takes effort to do that, but again, it's keeping them engaged in doing those things. And then also teaching an alternative method of receiving the same input that they may be getting from the self-stimulatory activity. I had a child that I work with that did a lot of hand flapping off and on, and it was more so his mom came up with a great one because it really was a release, because self-stimulatory to a certain degree serves a purpose. They're doing it like we might sit here and tap the table, twirl our hair, and I always tell people we all stim to a certain degree, but it's just sometimes in other disabilities it may be more pronounced, and it's trying to teach those more socially appropriate ways sometimes to get that same input. And what this mother had taught the child to do rather than this, when he would get excited, is every once in a while you would see him kind of go, and then that would be it. But really just changing it into a more appropriate, not as obvious thing. So again, it wouldn't stigmatize him to a degree, but he would still get that same calming input that he needed. So those are the three primarily during for replacement behaviors that are important. And then this is always the big one, is everybody wants to know, but how do I respond to the behaviors? And again, this is where function comes into play, because if you don't know why the behavior is occurring, you may not be responding in the most appropriate way. And you might, again, be inadvertently reinforcing the very behavior that you're trying to get rid of. So again, what do I do when a behavior happens, and how do I respond? So with attention tangible, and I'll go into more explanation on this because I think it's very important, never give attention for a problem behavior. Now let me go on and explain that a little bit further. Withdraw attention for problem behaviors. Ignoring will work. To a degree, yes, you do not do this for self-injurious behaviors, but where all this comes down to is this last part, is you ignore the behavior, not your child. So if you have a child that might be exhibiting self-injurious behaviors, let's say biting the hand, it might be simply blocking it and still continuing on with the demand situation. Or if they're doing it for attention. More times than not, when I see self-injurious behaviors, it's typically because they're trying to get out of something. But again, by blocking it and moving on, instead of going, no, don't bite yourself, because then they're like, oh yeah, that's how I get out of it, or that's how I get the attention. And that's not, we want to teach them that's not how we get the attention. It's through the appropriate behaviors that we want. So with escape avoidance, The big thing is never allow your child to escape the demand again. If that means you have to physically guide them to complete the demand, that's very important to do. And then also, if you're during a teaching situation, as Pam from PTA earlier mentioned, it's finding that motivation, finding those things that really motivate to complete task demands, whatever it may be it through therapies or at school or at home. And it's very important to find those things and how you respond, because the worst possible thing that you could do is just completely remove the demand, because then the child learns over time that's how they get out of having to do it, is by exhibiting that behavior. So again, you're inadvertently reinforcing the behavior. And as I mentioned before, it takes time to change these behaviors, because the longer that they have been occurring, the longer sometimes it does take to shape the new behaviors that we want. But it is possible, and it does take time. So again, with all of these things, these are standard guidelines, and that should be implemented on an individual basis. Oh, yes. That right there? The automatic, sorry, yes. One of the things is very similar to the self-injurious behaviors. Is we might have some of the self-stimulatory, the rocking, flapping hands, again, focusing on what do we want the child to do. It could be quiet hands, hands down, those type of things. In other words, telling them what we want them to do. It's what is considered, like in schools and everything else, is a positive behavior approach. Is telling them those things we want them to do versus focusing on the things that we don't want them to do. And then also, even sometimes another way to do it is just by redirecting them to another activity, to interrupt it versus bringing a lot of attention to it. Because again, I'm a firm believer that serves a certain purpose for the child, but it's finding a way also to give that socially appropriate type of behavior in order to get that same input that they may need. And again, a key component is prevention. Reinforce the good. Look for the good. I always say that sometimes, especially when we're having behavioral challenges with a child or an individual, is we tend to focus on, when's it going to happen again? When is this going to occur again? And we really focus on that. And the power of positive praise really does a lot, and really focusing on the good things, catching them being good, those type of things. And as I said earlier, I'm a big person in the prevention of it, because it is so much easier to prevent a behavior from occurring than dealing with it once it happens. But again, that doesn't mean walking around on eggshells, to just avoid all situations so the behaviors don't occur, but it's setting yourself up for success. If you're going somewhere where it might be a waiting period, of setting them up for that, having a busy bag of stuff together that can keep them engaged. And even, like I said, again, a timer is a beautiful thing. I even have one on my phone that I use sometime with my own child. Okay, when the timer goes off, it's time, to turn the computer off. It's time to go do this. It's time to go to bed. Because then I look at it, the timer is the dictator and not me. Even with my own child one time of saying, okay, it's time to go to bed, and getting that, no, I don't want to go, and then going there, and turning on the timer. Okay, when the timer goes off, it's time to go to bed, and off he went when the timer went off. It's not always that easy, but that's just an example of being able to say, is allowing the timer and different tools like that to be the dictator of the behavior. And again, as I said, is addressing those behaviors depending on the function, because, for example, with the escape avoidance type of things, if you're letting out of a certain demand because a behavior is occurring, once it's over with, you need to kind of analyze, okay, how did we get to this meltdown mode, and figuring out how you can make the transition easier or different things like that. But it's very important to address those behaviors depending on the function of them. And then think replacement. What do I want my child to do instead? What behaviors are we trying to change? And those are very important components. And you heard me say this earlier. Behavior will often get worse before it gets better. That's the hardest thing for people to conceptualize many times, that the behaviors will sometimes often get worse before they get better. But look at it this way. That might also mean that what you're doing is working and they're just pushing it. They're pushing that envelope. I always think of the 2-year-old kind of boop, boop, and they're pushing the envelope a little bit because they're sitting there thinking, well, this worked before, it's not working now, and so they're going to push the envelope a little bit. It's having all those other tools in place to really move it along. So I always tell people, remember the 3 C's. Stay calm, be calm with your responses, and respond, do not react. It is such an intentional, unfortunately, sometimes for us to react to a behavior rather than respond. Especially when we're dealing with our own children. It's staying calm in your responses because many times our own behavior feeds into their behavior. If we're reacting to us or freaking out about every small thing or anything, it really does affect the child's behavior. And then we need to be clear, especially when we're in what I would call like a crisis moment or a meltdown moment, is keeping your wording and direction simple and to the point. A lot of explanation, no matter what level cognitively the individual may be, it's sticking straight to the point of what we're trying to do and what we need to do versus the lecture. And that's very hard a lot of times. It's, why are you doing this? We don't need to be doing this, and blah, blah, blah. And I always joke that a lot of times when we're talking about the fight or flight with a child when they might be in that crisis mode is the Charlie Brown teacher. That's all they're hearing. It's when they're really upset. And I always think of that so remember that when you're talking to your child, that it's very important to keep the wording simple and to the point. And then obviously consistency. Follow through with your demands, rules, and behavior expectations. And then it's also important, again, for that individual to know what those expectations are. It's important for you to know as the parent, or both parents, to be on the same page so that you're consistent. Or when they go to, grandparents' houses, that everybody's on the same page. This is what they do. If they're flopping on the floor and throwing a fit because they want something that they can't have right now, we don't give it to them. We figure something else out. We work around it, but it's not here, so you'll be quiet because they're in distress. And I know that's a difficult thing sometimes, especially when we're looking at, I have worked with parents before that if the child gets too upset, sometimes it will go into a seizure. So it's important, yes, you have to know the limitations, but it's really in that gray area for the individuals, and that gray area is okay, but it's important to keep these things in there and be consistent with what you are doing and following through with it. So to review and recap, when we're talking about attention tangible, remember, ignore the behavior, not the child. Another example, I had a little guy that anytime you would reprimand somebody else, he would act out because he didn't like you getting on to somebody else, but then he also wanted the attention himself, and he would climb on tables. And of course, you can't ignore that because if they're up on a table, they can injure themselves. So it was as simple as continuing talking to the person that I was and going up and picking him up and putting him back down on the ground and then continuing on, but not going, get off, no, don't be up there, but more so of just kind of guiding him back to what he needed to be doing. And then it's also important, is have your, as I call it, your battle plan sometimes. If there's certain desired items, then be careful to not have those accessible. Or if you say, no, you can't have the Coke, then don't leave it on the table and walk out of the room. Take the Coke with you. If it's a toy, those different types of things. If it's, candy, various things, it's important to remember. Also set yourself up for success as well as the child. And I mentioned earlier about eye contact. It's a very powerful thing of directing that. I have some little guys that sometimes that I might be, we're sitting, it's time to sit down in the chair, and they're like looking, they're doing stuff, they might be tossing something, but they're literally trying to get eye contact with me because they're like, wow, you're not reacting, you're not responding. And that eye contact, so as soon as we're working through the compliance and they're doing what they need to be doing, they have my full attention, and it's Disneyland, and we're having a good time. But when I call it my behavior mode, is when those behaviors occur, I go into behavior mode. When they're not occurring, it's a party and it's Disneyland. And it's really important to differentiate between the two. And In review about escape avoidance, again, it's not complying with instructions, learning tasks. It could be as simple as, pick the towel up off the floor. It might be something as simple as that. But continuing with original demand until compliance, and verbally ignore other behaviors that might be in response. Whatever that specific behavior is that we're focusing on, they might do other things like knocking things over, attempting to hit. Even sometimes I have, kiddos that will do that because they're looking for that reaction. Stick to what you're doing. That's so important, because as soon as you say something like, don't hit me, you've just switched the demand to something else. So they're hoping that you'll forget whatever that demand may be. Does that make sense to everyone? And that's a hard one to do because, they need to know that they can't hit or they can't throw something. And typically, more times than not, they know. That's why they do it, because it's been effective in some environment. So it's really important to remember that. And they know. They know more times than not. And in the crisis moment is not the time to necessarily address that. That's a teachable moment. When things are calm and we're calm, then we can talk about those things. Because again, when we're looking at behavior, especially when you're having a behavior moment, it's about doing and not talking as much. And then sensory behaviors are more reinforcing than other competing reinforcement. Again, block, redirect to something else, and keeping them engaged. That's so important a lot of times when you're noticing a lot of self-stimulatory behaviors, is really exposing them to other things and guiding them through that. It's a matter of pairing it a lot of times is what that's called. It might be something they don't find very pleasurable, but pairing it with a situation where they might have a moment where they could rock just a little bit. And okay, now we're going to do this. We're going to put the blocks in, or we're going to play with the toy. And little bit at a time. It's a building process. And again, as I said, respond rather than react. Physically block self-injurious or aggressive behaviors. And tell your child what you want them to do versus what you do not want them to do. Unless, of course, there are certain things in safety situations that, of course, the stop, different things. But more times than not, it's always better, it's always a teachable moment, is telling them what we want them to do. And this would be an example. Don't run versus we're walking. And I do work with kiddos a lot, that they might decide that they're going to take off and go, and they're like, woo! We're walking, we need to walk. Because especially if we're having ambulatory problems, that's very important to kind of gauge that. And this is an important one that sometimes that we forget, is don't ask when it's something that we're expecting them to do. There's a difference between choice versus expectation. A choice would be do you want to come and sit down? I always think of the 3-year-old, you'll get the honest answer, no. So if you're not giving a choice, then you need to make sure that you're laying the expectation. Okay, it's time to sit down for dinner. It's time to go to bed, versus do you want to go to bed? If it's not a choice, don't give them one. That doesn't mean be the barker and dictator of rules, but it's also as simple as just in the verbiage of how you say it. Makes a huge difference when you're looking at trying to avoid the power play, or whoops, I slipped up, I asked them when I should have said, okay, this is what we're going to go do. Do you want to go to therapy? It's time to go to therapy. Let's go. No, I don't want to go to therapy. So it's better to set them up for success and yourself to reduce those behavior challenges. And this is the one I just said, will you please come and sit down, versus okay, please come and sit down, versus will you please? And so to remember also that I mentioned earlier positive behavior supports, and you might hear this more so from teachers, because this is big catch-all in schools right now as we're looking at positive behavior supports. It can be setting up the environment for more success. A prime example would be is if you go into any typical preschool classroom, they're very divided many times. Like you have your stations, you have your sensory, your kitchen area, and there's not, yes, developmental reasons that's there, but it's also there because it deters. I see this big space and I need to fill it up when you get the kid that wants to run or pace. And that when you have those divided areas, and such even can be at home, if you have an issue with a child that might have eating issues at the table, setting it up for success. of where they might not have as easy access to get up from the table and go somewhere else. That doesn't mean locking them in where they can't go anywhere, but really, again, setting yourself up environmentally for those things. And I like what this says is I got this from a training that I went to is positive behavior supports ask us to change our behavior to help our child change theirs. And that's very important. A lot of times it's when we change our behavior is we'll get the positive results in the individual that we're working with or with our children. All right. It's me again. I'm Robin Blue. I will be very honest with you about what I'm going to talk to you about is a lot of times people are like, wow, you're a behavior analyst and a music therapist. For any of you that have had ABA in your life already, it seems like two completely opposite fields, but it was actually as a music therapist that brought me into the world of ABA, of working with families in Memphis that had home programs in place. And I was hired to come in to provide private music therapy and started to get results from the kids, because I'd go in and look at their program books. I didn't know. I remember these families talking about what ABA was, and I was like, yeah, what is that? And going home and looking it up on the internet of what applied behavior analysis was. But I would go in and look at their program books of what different targets and programs that they were working on, and took those and pretty much put them into a musical setting and was starting to get results. And the behavior analyst that was working with these families started, what are you doing? Because he's like, yeah, right, you don't know how to take data and stuff like that. So I started showing him at the home workshops on the weekend, and he was like, oh, okay, and was getting results. The kids would do stuff normally through music that they would not do just verbally, us back and forth. So that's why I laugh whenever I did go for my behavior analyst and I had to justify what they considered experimental therapies, of justifying why I thought music therapy was a very research and evidence-based practice. But I joke with people, I said there's misconceptions with ABA just as there's misconceptions with music therapy. But the type of music therapist that I was, or still am, was very clinical based, very data driven, but the beauty of it was that we got to use something called music as a tool to reach non-musical goals and get results from the children that we worked with. But first I want you to think is, how do you think music affects you every day? I mean, what's one of the first things most of us do is we get in the car and we turn the radio on. We hear a song and makes us think about something else. It focuses attention, it can elicit emotions, aids in expression and feelings, facilitates socialization, and really historically music is one of the things that is found in all cultures. All cultures. It serves religious purposes, it serves, celebration, all different types of things. So what is music therapy? I do tell people my job is not to come into a room, burn incense, play kumbaya, and make people feel better. There might be some music therapists that you meet that might be more of their approach. But again, very clinical based of what we do with music therapy. And then also if you would go to a different facility, a school-based music therapist versus an oncology unit at a hospital, you might see two different types of music therapy being implemented. But my background was primarily working in an assistive technology center, working with speech therapists, PTs, and stuff like that, and us working as a multidisciplinary team. So there's the nice, fancy, formal definition of what music therapy is. But what I like to tell people is it's music is used to reach non-musical goals. Yes, we do come across some clients that they do have musical abilities that we can help heighten through adaptive music lessons, but my goal as a music therapist is not necessarily to teach music, but it's to use it as a tool. Education and training of a music therapist is different than as an educator. There's a certification process, internship. Treatment is very individualized. I know a few years ago there was the Mozart effect or different stuff like that. NICUs were giving out CDs saying if you let your baby listen to this, they'll be smarter. That's not music therapy. It's using music, but that's not necessarily music therapy. It's very individualized because what I might find musically reinforcing, you might not. I might like AC/DC, you think no. Yeah, so it really depends on musical taste as well. But as a music therapist, we use the training as a musician and a clinician to make changes in the cognitive, physical, communication, and emotional skills of individuals. So why does music make such a big difference? The primary thing is what most people don't know about music is it targets the brain. Music is what you could call, in layman's terms, like a whole brain activity. Whereas when you're talking to someone, speech is typically processed on one side of the brain. When you're having a music experience or listening to music or actually active participation in music, it's activating all different types of things. I've had a video, which I couldn't find before I came to this one, but it was really neat. It showed the actual brain activity and how it would light up all different fields and areas of the brain. It was really fascinating. So it really engages a person on different levels that talking or moving or different things just in general do not address. But we're talking about music in the brain. Again, like I said, it's a whole brain activity. It stimulates all areas of the brain. It really, if you think about music, it's very predictable. It has an end, a middle, or a beginning, middle, and end. So it's very predictable and also helps to set the stage for transitions and different things, which are some of the tools that I only have a little bit to speak to you all about this today, but some different things to think about when you're thinking about setting yourself up for success, for transitions even with your kiddos. It provides a great sensory environment. Language development, it's a fun learning experience. If you think about how most of us learned our ABCs was through song, it's actually to the tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Baa Baa Black Sheep. That's those tunes and things like that stick in our head for a reason. As I said, like the alphabet song, it's a mnemonic device of helping you memorize something, putting something to a song to memorize. There's state songs, there are all different types of different things to help you with memory skills. And music is a powerful tool because it helps to facilitate communication. Many of the clients that I worked with that were on the autism spectrum, they may not talk to me, but they would sing to me. And that was a point of communication, and I do see that a lot with all the different populations that I work with. It helps to break those patterns of isolation because it's a social connection even. An individual, many times I'll be asked, well, if they can't read music or they, can't pay attention to music or figure it out, then how do you do music? I have things like adaptive charts. It might be letters, numbers, and colors, and they look at it and they match it to that on a piano to play different songs. It may be we're working on fine motor skills, we're working on color recognition, we're working on letters and numbers, attention span, compliance, all those different tools just in that one small moment to where to the child or the individual, if they're playing a song, they find it reinforcing. And then it can also help to decrease self-stimulatory behaviors as well and impulsivity. I had a kid, again, another one that used to do a lot of hand flapping, and it was during a session when he would get excited, so stick him a rock in that hand and it becomes functional. We're now playing along in a song or beating on a drum versus hitting on something as a self-stimulatory behavior. And then it teaches social skills. We're looking at facilitating learning, and again, it provides that safe and predictable environment. And then it can also help to increase impulse control because there might be a lot of start and stop when you're playing songs. We're going to play, stop, and wait. Play, stop. Even just little games like that. And then increase attention to a task because it's all about motivation again, because many times with the music, that is what it's reinforcing in itself. Many times when I was transitioning over back and forth between music therapy and the ABA, it took a while with certain things because ABA, they might have used a lot of tangible or edible reinforcers, where a lot of times I could use music in the music therapy sessions and even crossing over into the ABA. But everyday strategies, if you're thinking about there's passive versus active music making, whereas that would be anywhere from like listening to something to actively participating in the music experience. And then there's things, this is a huge one from even little guys on up, our transition songs, our piggybacking songs. It might be something, I have a song for everything. So there's like a potty training song put to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It's tinkle, tinkle on the pot in my pants, I better not. Like a big boy, I will try to keep my pants nice and dry. Tinkle, tinkle on the pot in my pants, I better not. It's amazing, though, sometimes if you have a child that you're working on potty training, of how that will keep them engaged, where they'll sit there and you can sing it over and over again. But again, what does it do? It's giving instructions in the song about what they need to do, that we want to stay nice and dry and different things like that. But that's taking a familiar tune that the child knows that you know and just changing and doing different words to it. Another big one is cleanup. How many of us have heard that cleanup song? Clean up, everybody, everywhere. That one. It's same thing. There's a huge difference. One time I did like a case study with the kids with the waiting in line song between, okay, everybody needs to put your stuff up and wait in line so we can go, versus this waiting in a line, waiting till it's time. And the kids would just automatically start putting their stuff up because they knew that it was time to clean up and come to the door and wait in line. And it was like what I call the Pied Piper effect, but how that music made that transition so much easier. And then learning put to music. There's sing-song, there's call and response, and that's what, especially for those who do have the little ones, is using a lot of that. Using music, again, as the facilitator of the information of what you're wanting to have the child do. If it's, sitting and making things that, let's put your shoes on, go and put them on your feet. Let's put your shoes on. I mean, there's so many different things like that you can think of, those different tools to get those behavioral things that you're wanting. And that's where I found it as kind of that good meeting ground with myself. With the ABA, it's just the communicator was more of the music. Because another way to look at it as well is I can shut you off when you're talking to me. When you're singing to me, I can't. It gets through the brain somehow, some way. And so that's another way to look at it too, is when you're guiding and directing what you're wanting your child to do. And then another big one, especially when we're looking at ambulatory skills or gait training to improve, you put a drum to it. I worked with a physical therapist before to improve gait training, and it really does make a difference. If when you're trying to, I've had it where standing in front of them, beating on a paddle drum of a certain beat that we're wanting them to walk and get their gait down to, or a song that you can speed up or slow down that they can wear on a headset. It also makes that therapy time more reinforcing. Again, there's that same thing with that motivation of finding that reinforcement. But it's also one of the most important elements in spoken language of the prosody and everything of when you're speaking, and the rhythm and everything of how that music makes that difference. And some other things to consider is the vestibular, the more of the movement with music. These are things you can do with your kids at home, of finding and making that time to even the rocking back and forth and doing stuff like that to help increase that, because again, you're pairing it with something that's reinforcing. Again, songs they like, songs they like to listen to, that they like to do, and using those to your advantage. And also visual aids, finding different things that you can pair up with it. An example would be even with the eating, if there's issues with eating or it's sitting at a table, is pairing a visual with those things in conjunction with the music to direct them of what you want them to do. And then also those singing is a big thing with the different vocal. If we're working on communication skills, verbal skills, trying to increase speech and language, singing can do wonderful things, even if it just starts out as humming or imitating and different things like that, of really branching that out and increasing the speech. And there's been a lot of research done on that with stroke victims, as well as many times when they couldn't talk, they could still sing because it connected through different areas of the brain. And I always like this, be it music therapy or using music-based strategies to make life a little bit more fulfilling with the transitioning and engaging. I like what this says is that music therapy can make the difference between withdrawal and awareness, between isolation and interaction, between chronic pain and comfort, and between demoralization and dignity. Because oftentimes when words fail, music speaks. And that's very important to remember, and that asks that when you're having those difficult moments of transitioning your child, think of that. Let that be a reflective thing of how that you can tell them, let that be the communicator of what you're wanting them to do, and put it to music. And many times that you'll get that response where otherwise you may not. But I know that was a real quick, because I know we've run out of time, Kat, but I just wanted to touch on the music therapy a little bit with y'all. I've had the experience for a long time of working with children, see it doing wonderful things. But again, I hope that that's some information that you can take with you on how to apply different music strategies with individuals and to get the response and the results that you want. And then also it just makes things a little bit more fulfilling as well. But I did want to ask is with regards to the music therapy, are there any questions from anybody? Were there any of you that have ever heard of music therapy outside of today? Okay, good. Wow, okay, good. That's a good thing. So, any questions? Oh.
Of course.
I know. I know.
I'm sorry to everyone.
I know.
No, I guess I had a question when you were talking about using music. I can't remember. Music as a reinforcer versus an activity. I didn't really understand that because my son gets music therapy to augment his learning tasks at school every week. So I understand it from that perspective, but music is the one thing that calms him and kind of soothes him. So how do I use it more, I guess? What do you mean by reinforcer versus an activity?
Well, there was the passive and the active music therapy. The passive would be like he likes to listen to it and it calms him down. The active would be using it during learning activities. But the music in itself being a reinforcing, in other words, it makes, many times will make the learning activity more tolerable. And so it's reinforcing in itself. Is that, yeah. That's what I meant. Yes, we have one right here. But that's good. So ABA and music therapy?
Yeah.
Do your ABA, does your behavior analyst and your music therapist fight? No. So you've met one now that's one and the same. So.
Whenever you mentioned those tailors to the individual, I've noticed that my daughter likes it better when certain things are played or sung higher pitch rather than lower pitch. So you tailor everything ranging from pitch to notes to different songs, all that's totally
right.
specifically for the individual.
Right. And of course that's harder to tell necessarily specifically unless you musical ability in yourself. Are you a musician as well? Yeah. So you notice those things, but yeah, all those make a difference, and you'll notice that high, low, volume, not just necessarily the style of music, but it could be because there's certain things that could be more sensory prone, that might be more auditory defensiveness versus stuff that's more soothing to them. So yes, those different indicators of being observant of those makes a huge difference in the effect that the music has on the individual. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you again for this opportunity to come out and speak with you guys today. I'm glad this has been a productive conference for everybody.